कर्मणो गतिः. Indeed, action should be known. Forbidden action should be known, and inaction should also be known. The nature of action is incomprehensible. Having told us in the earlier verse that he will tell us what action is, knowing which you will know inaction. Now he is classifying action into three categories. Karma means obligatory duty. Every one of us is placed in a certain situation where we have certain obligations to perform. Obligation to our family, obligation to the city in which we live, obligation to the country, to humanity, to the world, etc. And the obligations of each person are different. Above all, you have an obligation to yourself. And what is that obligation? To realize the self. So, these obligatory duties belong to two categories. They are further categorized into two. One is nitya. Nitya means everyday routine activities. Every one of us has certain routine activities. This is called nitya karma. And naimittika karma is special occasional duty which comes to you as a result of a particular situation. That situation could be, say for instance, while you're walking along the road or you're driving along, there suddenly you see an accident that takes place right before your eyes. Then that naimittika karma, that occasional special duty, is to reach out the person, the victim of the accident, and help, maybe take him to hospital or whatever it is. But that's not part of your everyday routine obligations, right? So these two are karma. The second is vikarma, forbidden activities. These forbidden activities, for those non-thinkers, which is vast majority of human beings, don't think for themselves. So the leaders of society think for them and say, give commandments. There are certain activities that you cannot perform. For instance, in our society we have the law. The law forbids us from performing certain activities where you will be punished for that activity. So these are commandments. But the wise people, the thinking lot, thinkers like all of us, don't need commandments, don't need do's and don'ts. We have a conscience, and what they tell us is, you follow your conscience. If your conscience permits you to perform a certain activity, then it is not forbidden. If a certain action is not permitted by your conscience, then it falls in the realm of forbidden activity, vikarma, and you should not perform that action. But the problem is, our desires are so great that you set aside the conscience and you go ahead and do what you like. And that causes tremendous mental agitations. So anyway, this is vikarma. So he says, you should know what action is, karma, you should know what vikarma is, forbidden action, and you should also know what inaction is. Inaction is the inactive principle. Atman, a karma. So Atman causes all actions to take place, itself is inactive. Like electricity is that which lends light to all the bulbs, but itself is not fluorescent. So light is an incredible combination of non-fluorescent electricity passing through a non-fluorescent bulb, giving fluorescence, light. Similarly, Atman is inactive. When that inactive Atman functions through inactive body, mind and intellect, it causes vibrant, powerful actions to come out. So, what he's saying here is, within the realm of action, you must know what obligatory actions are, what forbidden actions are, and you must also know the source of all actions, which is Atman. And then he says, the nature of action is incomprehensible. The nature of action is incomprehensible because, let's see where action springs from. Action springs from vasana. Vasana is the precursor of desire, means it is unmanifest desire. Vasana is defined as a distinct tendency, an inclination for a particular kind of activity. For instance, if you have a vasana for cricket, that vasana for cricket will manifest first as a thought in the intellect, thought for cricket. That thought for cricket will get consolidated as a desire for cricket, and the desire for cricket will lead to action, which means you will go to, where is the test match now? Calcutta. You'll either go to Calcutta or you'll switch on the television and get glued to it the whole time. Or you'll play cricket. Now when you perform action merely because you have a desire for that action, this desire-ridden activity further creates a vasana in your system. And thus we are caught in this cycle. Vasana, thought, desire, action, which again creates one more vasana. What he is saying here is, if you, this action that you perform, if you perform that action not merely because you have a desire to perform it, but you have the intellect comes into being, comes into play and says, decides whether it is obligatory for you to perform or not, and you perform obligatory desires, then that action does not rebound as one more vasana in your system. That's why, because vasana is the root of all actions, and vasana is beyond the realm of the intellect, is very subtle, difficult to understand. He says the nature of action is incomprehensible. 18. Karmanya karmaya pashet akarmani cha karmaya sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukta kritsna karma krit. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction. Saha buddhiman manusheshu. What a beautiful term. Such a person is wise among human beings. Such a one is a yogi, yuktaha, united person, a doer of all actions. This is the definition of human perfection in terms of action. It's a beautiful piece of literature. I don't know if you are able to understand what he's talking about. A criminal performs actions. An ordinary person like us, you and me, we also perform actions. A sage, a person of realization, a man of wisdom also performs actions. What is the difference? What is the difference between a criminal's activities, our activities, and the activities of a sage? Is what he's defining here. He says, one who sees action in inaction. One who is able to see the potential for action in Atman. And when he sees actions, he understands that Atman is behind all activities. In other words, his focus is on Atman, not on the action. When he sees Atman per se, where there are no activities, he understands there is tremendous potential for activity that there is in Atman. And when he sees the manifestation actions, he understands that it is Atman that is behind all these activities. Just as an electrical engineer, when he goes to the mains and he sees all wires and connections, he understands the potential there for so many manifestations of electricity. There could be air conditioning, there could be so many computers, there could be lights, there could be fans, there could be all heaters, geysers, all kinds of manifestations coming out of that one little wire. And when he sees the different manifestations, he understands, he is secure in the knowledge that there is one electricity behind all these. That is an electrical engineer. But the average person, you and me, we get carried away by the manifestation. We don't understand. We're out of sync with electricity. Similarly, here is a person who is a technician in the realm of the spirit. Whenever he sees action, he understands the source of it all is Atman, and therefore he does not get affected by the quality of the action. And when he sees Atman, he understands the potential for so many brilliant actions. Such a person is Buddhiman. What is our concept of Buddhiman? Are you a MSc or PhD or IIT or MBA? This is our concept of a wise person. That person may not know anything about Atman. He is a Buddhu, not Buddhiman. You know, our concept of wisdom itself is so shallow. And that's why we put unwise people on a pedestal and then follow them. How many of us understand what is wise? All Nobel Prizes are given to completely unwise people. So, sabuddhiman manusheshu, such a person is wise among human beings. Saha yuktaha, he is a united person, he is united to Atman. You know, the rule is, the law is, as you think, so you become. It's not what you do that determines where you will go, it's where your thoughts are. Even in the relative, it functions like that. A true musician is one who's constantly thinking of music, there's thoughts of music going on in his mind, and therefore he comes out with brilliant music. A true sports person is one whose thoughts are constantly on the field. The minute off-field activities take over his mind, the decline starts. Similarly, a true spiritual person is not one who's engaged in acts of spirituality. A spiritual person is one who, even in mundane material activities, is focused on Atman. That's what he's saying here. Never mind what the quality of the action. It could be a materialistic action, it could be a spiritual action, it could be a foolish action, it could be an intelligent action. The focus is on Atman, that which enables all activities, facilitates all activities. Even for a split second, if you are able to focus on that, see, you must try it out. Only then you understand what power there is, what tranquility, serenity there is, and what happiness there is in it. For a split second, withdraw your mind from the preoccupations in the world and just focus on Atman and say, this Atman, spirit, is that which facilitates all actions. You're at peace. And when the mind is at peace, brilliant actions come out of you without your even realizing it. So, saha yuktaha, and as you proceed, as your focus is on Atman, ultimately you merge with Atman. Such a person is the real doer of all actions. Kritsna karma krit. You become the doer of all actions. Whatever comes out of you is powerful, potent, successful. And that's why this philosophy is so useful in everyday life. If you want to succeed in life, how can you expect to become successful when your mind is in a state of complete chaos and confusion and agitation? Somehow or the other, you must make sense out of all this and get your mind to a relative calm at least. And that relative calm comes when you set aside your personal interests and dedicate yourself to something higher, something nobler, something above yourself. And then you see things that you never saw before. A whole new world opens up before you. A vision you get of the beauty, the magnificence that there is splashed everywhere in the world. 19. यस्य सर्वे समारम्भाः कामसङ्कल्पवर्जिताः ज्ञानाग्निदग्धकर्माणम् तमाहुः पंडितं बुधाः. The wise call that person a sage, whose endeavors are free from kama and sankalpa, desire and expectation, whose actions are burnt by the fire of knowledge. So, the interesting thing he says here is, first is the wise people call such a person a sage. Why does he say that? Because the ordinary person, you and I, we have no basis on which to understand whether a person is a sage or not. Therefore it is that the scriptures tell us, follow the teachings, not the personality of the teacher. Because you have no yardstick by which to measure the spiritual development of a person. Do you know what makes for a realized soul? Do you know what makes for spiritual development? And since we don't know this, we have no access to the inner workings of the person, we make completely wrong assessments based on externals. What he does, what time he wakes up, what kind of clothes he wears, these are all immaterial. Since we don't have this, he says ordinary people don't have the capacity to recognize. Therefore he says the wise call him a sage. Who is a sage? A sage is one whose actions continue, but he renounces two things: desire, which comes from the past, and expectation, which is in the future. So if you are able to cut the mind meandering into the unproductive avenues of the past, which is dead, it's over and done with, and the future, which is not yet come into existence, and focus entirely on the present, then you get dynamic activity. And such actions get burnt by the fire of knowledge. So our concept of spirituality is dropping actions. What is our concept of spirituality? Renunciation means not doing certain activities. It's not that. Renunciation is the state where you continue your activities with perhaps greater fervor, greater commitment, greater concentration. All that you give up is the two things that interfere with the action, which is desire from the past, expectation from the future. If you are able to clip the two, desire and expectation, how do you do that? Shift your focus, shift the motivating force of the action from desire to obligation, from desire to dedication. Then it makes a world of difference. The same action, whatever it be, say a musician who's singing, if he is singing for a personal interest, then of course he'll have a desire. He has a desire to perform to larger audiences, maybe he has a desire to gain name, fame, so many things. And there is expectation of appreciation, of reward. While he is singing, if he is traumatized by desire and expectation, what level of singing will he come up with? Instead, the same activity of singing, if he dedicates it to a higher cause, then whatever comes out of him is perfect. Tansen, you've heard of, a famous singer, musician in Akbar's court. Akbar was captivated by Tansen's music. And one day he asked him, he says, he was curious. He said, who's your guru? Take me to your guru. Tansen said, okay, both of them went. And they went to a village in a small temple there, and they heard this guru. Not one person did he have as an audience. He sat there in the temple and sang to the Lord. And it was captivating music. So Akbar was completely fulfilled, satisfied, and went back to the court, went back to his darbar. And there he asked Tansen, says, "You are a great musician, but your guru has a distinct edge over you. What's the difference?" Tansen said, very simple, "I sing for you, he sings for God." That's the difference. So if you're able to switch the motivation of your action for personal return, expectation of a reward, to, as we saw the other day, you function out of a sense of thanksgiving, function out of a sense of abundance, and whatever you're doing, you do it as your offering to the Lord. What a difference it will make. Recently in Bombay, there was a news item that the senior most manager of MTNL started a system where first thing in the morning he had a prayer session, and nobody was compelled to attend it. People just attended. And as the word spread, more and more people started attending it. And then they discovered to their amazement that their performance actually improved. The customer service improved dramatically, their work improved dramatically. And this is what it's all about. Shift your attention. So, actions get burnt by the fire of knowledge. When you dedicate your actions to a higher cause, that action does not create a further spiral of desire or vasana in your system, and your personality gets cleansed of desires. 20. Tyaktva karma phala sangam nitya trupto nirashrayah karmanyabhipravrittopi naiva kinchit karoti saha. In the previous verse 19, he speaks of how you get free from actions of the world. Here he is saying how you can harmonize with external situations, having forsaken attachment to the fruit of action. Nitya truptaha, what a beautiful concept. Always satisfied, always fulfilled. Nirashrayah, not dependent on anything. Karmanya bhipravrittopi, though performing action, such a one does nothing. It's a beautiful concept. So what he's saying is, having forsaken attachment to fruit of action, karma phala sangam. What is wrong with getting attached to the fruit of action? You might say, so what? You can't perform action without having a fruit in mind. That's true. But having fixed the fruit means the goal. Then you have to work out what you're going to do in order to achieve that goal. And then while performing the action, don't let your mind stray into the unproductive avenue of the fruit which is in the future. Why? Because the fruit belongs to the future. It's the result of your present action. While performing the present action, if your mind slips to the future, to that extent your mind is not on the present action will become ineffective and you will experience failure. Second is, the fruit is beyond your control. You might act to the best of your ability, but there are so many other factors that have to come together in order for the action to be successful. Since it is beyond your control, there's no point in your thinking about it. One step further, the fruit is the cumulative effect of all your past actions put together, not just your present action. And the past actions are over and done with, beyond your control anyway. So you have to get to the state where you find contentment, fulfillment, satisfaction in the performance of the present action. then you will be happy at all times, you will be successful because your actions will be powerful. When you're dependent on the future, on the fruit, your happiness is constantly dependent on something that you will achieve in the future. Therefore, in the present, you are always unhappy. Next thing is that dependence on the fruit makes you dependent on factors over which you have no control. You get victimized, and it leads to mental agitation.